Hello and welcome to the Publicly Challenged Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Oswald, and I hope you join me on my quest for knowledge to become a better public land hunter, angler, and forager. Stick with this and who knows, maybe we will learn something together. All right, real quick before we get started on the show, I'm just going to talk about Treeline Academy. You've heard me say it. I can't even tell you how many times. Mark Livesey is treelineacademy.net. That's treelineacademy.net. Sign up. Use the promo code PC2020. Save yourself $20. Can't say it enough. It's awesome, amazing, most comprehensive e-scouting course out there. Check it out for yourself. Sign up. Use promo code PC2020. And now let's get to the show. All right, so I'm sitting here in Southern Illinois with my lifelong friend Seth and his dad Ron. And, geez, how long have we known each other, Seth? Whole life?
Yeah, since preschool, right?
Yeah. You were a tiger and I was a turtle on the play. I think that's it's a long time ago.
That was a long time ago, yeah.
And,
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, and Ron, kind of like my second dad, so it's kind of cool. Learned a lot from him over the years. Some bad, along with the good. But
Well,
say hi, Ron.
Some of it you can't talk about in front of women and children, but most of it you can.
Yeah. So we're down here, and you guys invited me down to your little deer camp, and it's pretty cool. And then we wanted to do some public scouting and probably didn't do as much as we anticipated, but there's so much, it's overwhelming, and when you got deer to process in the meantime, it kind of takes away time from that.
Yeah, it takes a couple hours per deer by the time you haul them out and get them all processed. And so visiting friends and going out to nice places to eat's pretty much non-existent.
That's okay. I'd rather rough it anyway. But so let's start out. I kind of want to talk about mushrooms, Seth, because you recently kind of dove headfirst in. I know you picked some mushrooms and stuff beforehand, but what was your experience before that?
Yeah, so really no previous experience. We stumbled upon some morels less than a quarter mile from my house. We've got a trail. Hundreds of people cross it every day, and my wife came home with some mushrooms, and she said, "Hey, do you know what these are?" And I looked down and I said, "Those are morels, and they are delicious. We should eat them. Where did you find these?" And so, we did our little local loop where we'd find morels every spring, and I don't know why. I always kind of had this assumption that most wild mushrooms were not choice, and had heard of morels and knew of chanterelles and things like that. But ultimately, yeah, through going out in the woods with you a lot, deer hunting, finding mushrooms on the side, kind of coming into the world of realizing how many great edible mushrooms we have in the state and in the places we hunt, the places that we already spend time in the woods. So, yeah, trying to learn as much as I can, trying new mushrooms, and it's been a fun ride the last couple of years.
I'm glad you went along for that ride with me because I thought it was pretty cool. Even though I don't think either of us got a deer that day, but at the same time, I was like, "Oh wait, stop!" And you're like, "What?" And you're like, "Why are you yelling?" I'm like, "Sorry, I'm pretty excited right now." Drop my pack, run over there. Pick, how many did we pick? It was like 3 or 4, but one of them I bet you was probably close to like 10, 15 pounds.
Yeah, it was
minimum.
30, 40 pounds total.
Yeah.
What, there were 5 big bunches of the sheep's heads.
And you're like, "What are you going to do with those?" And I go, "We're going to eat them." And I ran back to the truck, put them in the truck. You stayed there with all my stuff, and then we went back out and hunted that night. It was fairly unsuccessful, I think. I can't remember. I mean, we saw a deer anyway. Pretty much any time we go out, we see deer anymore, except for tonight, right? So
Yeah,
it
was quiet tonight.
Yeah, definitely. I think we ran into a couple does that night. I think that might have been the night that I drew on a doe and held for 2-3 minutes and ultimately couldn't get a shot, lowered, and then when I went to haul my bow back again, it was not going to come back. So I've since dropped 5 pounds off my draw weight for those types of situations.
That has made a difference for me with my shoulder. Some reason, it's just that extra 5 pounds when you pull it back. I can't do it multiple times anymore. And I don't know if it's actually something torn. I've never had it looked at, but that's What about you, Ron? When did your mushroom journey start? I mean, did you used to pick them a long time ago?
Yeah, back in the 70s, early 70s, late 60s actually. We used to squirrel hunt down Old River Road around Wilmington, Illinois there, and I got turned on to sheep's head back then, and that was probably about that and morels, the only two mushrooms I ever felt safe dabbling with.
Yep.
And then this year, I got turned on to stumpers, the honey mushrooms, and so it's been a good adventure this year. My morel hunting has never been good.
I'll take you out with me.
Yeah.
You just can't. I don't ever want to see you in my spot without you with me. But
understand.
But you come anytime.
Hey, we did let you come down to deer camp, okay? So
no, I told you I'll take you with me anytime, and you'll come back with a game bag full of mushrooms. That's for sure.
Yeah.
You just can't tell other people where it's at.
But no, you hit the nail on the head really with the safety concern, right? Because there's your few edible mushrooms that are easily identifiable. You can't mistake a morel or a sheep's head. There aren't those lookalikes, and yeah, the safety always worried me, the idea of being able to identify. But yeah, as you do come across new types, you realize what's safe, what's not. It's a fun hobby. The entire process, the looking for them, the identification. Luke, you and I are constantly texting pictures back and forth of non-edible mushrooms. Hey, what do you think this is? What do you think this might be? So it's a definitely neat hobby that goes along so well with everything else we like to do in the woods.
The outdoor lifestyle, right? I mean, that just kind of brings it full circle, and especially with what's going on these days and all the different stuff in the world, it's like these are skills that we've gotten away from that pretty soon you might need to rely on.
Oh, sure,
again.
sure. That's why I built a huge smoker and doing Virginia hams and
Nice.
cutting up my own sheep this year. I got a sheep I'm going to process and talk about the mushrooms. When we bought this place 4 years ago, the realtor was showing us around, and the hill right up above the pond here was just loaded with chanterelles. Didn't know what they were. Didn't know if they were edible. The realtor's daughter picked a couple because she was going over to Carbondale at the college there, and she took them to the college to have the people inspect them and make sure they were edible. And so when I come back and closed on the property, she said, "Yeah, those are chanterelles. They're supposed to be a really, really good mushroom." And I know I could have picked 50 pounds that day, and unfortunately, I've not been down here that time of year,
Were they yellows or were they the cinnabar? They were like the almost reddish golden color?
More of a yellowish gold color.
No, that's cool. That's definitely cool. That's something I never knew what they were, and you and I, just even in our travels before, have come across them, and then we both at the same time started looking around and we're like, those are chanterelles. And then it was just we were at the archery club. We were
at the archery club,
and
right.
we were like, hey, those are chanterelles. I've never found them before, or we have, and we walked past them, but we just never ID'd them.
Sure, yeah.
And that's kind of like, there's a book that I've got that's called The Safe Seven, and it's like the seven most identifiable, unmistakable mushrooms. And that's a pretty good book if you guys have never. It's Stan Tequila is the guy that wrote that book, and so he talks about shaggy manes, Old Man of the Woods, which is a bolete that has a weird looking, looks almost like a toasted marshmallow on the top because it's all cracked and white, and it's kind of neat to go through that. But at the same time, you see all these other ones and you want to know what they are, and like you and I were looking and you're like, is this a deadly galerina? Is this a destroying angel? All these different things, and then we were texting back and forth about, I don't remember what it was you were saying. You were going back out looking, and I said, yeah, I really wanted to find some shrimps. And you're like, a shrimp? And I was like, yeah, it's where it gets infected with a fungal parasite and it becomes something else. And you're like, okay. Next thing I know, you come back with a whole handful of shrimps in a picture, and I'm like, oh, man.
Perfect timing.
Yeah.
Well, because you told me about them, and I'm like, what is he talking about?
Yeah.
And I looked them up, and I did my research. I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. And then not a week later, there again, I'm out at the archery club, and there they are, all along the side of the trail, picking wood bluets. And, hey, look at that. There's some of those shrimps Luke's talking about.
Yep.
They were delicious.
Little jealous of that one.
Yeah, they were delicious.
Well, when I found the stumpers, I wasn't sure, so I took him over to Mousy. He's an 83-year-old guy that's been a woodsman all of his life, and he wasn't home, so I left the mushrooms. I left 2, and I said, "Are these edible?" And he said, "The one's a jack-o'-lantern." He said, "That's a chanterelle look-alike. Don't eat that one."
Yep.
And he said, "The other ones are stumpers." And he said, "In fact," he said, "I'm at my friend's house picking stumpers as we speak," when he called me back. And so I went over to his house, and guess what he's got out? The Coleman stove out in the garage, and he's cooking up stumpers so I can eat them. And then we went in his backyard, and I picked about 20 pounds of them for him because he's getting decrepit, and he can't hardly walk, so he rides it around his property on a riding lawnmower with a cart on the back, and I was riding on the back cutting mushrooms and putting them in his cart for him.
Nice.
So
Nice.
it was a good trade.
Yeah, so the jack-o'-lantern, like, a lot of people confuse chicken of the woods with a jack-o'-lantern, too, and that's something I just recently got on a Facebook page where help people ID them and stuff, and I can't believe. Here's my thing: if somebody wants to know what a mushroom is, take good pictures of it. That's number one, right?
Yeah.
Take the underside of it,
Yes.
not just from a distance and a picture. And so I found that's super helpful.
And learn how to do the spore check.
Spores is big.
Yeah.
So when you do yours, you use a white sheet of paper or a black sheet of
Half
paper.
and half,
depending
yeah.
on, right?
I'll use half white, half black, and I plop the mushroom over the top. That way I can catch any dark colors, any light colors. You get a good view of what you're working with that black and white contrast.
That's good.
Yeah,
And
that's
do you keep them,
and
too?
I found that really useful, right? Because there's a lot of lookalikes that is your defining factor between, with the wood bluets. You look at a blue mushroom that's growing in the woods, a purplish blue mushroom. It's like, ooh, I don't know, that doesn't look like I should be able to eat it. And then ultimately you realize that if you check off the identifying factors, the appearance and the spore print and where you found it growing. Where I was really worried about eating mushrooms in the past, I'm confident now. It's the idea of understanding that, yes, there are plenty of lookalikes that can kill you, but if you keep your markers and you do a thorough investigation, that you can rule out the poisonous from the edible. And I've been enjoying a lot of good edible mushrooms lately.
So let's talk about what was your impression of the bluets? Mine, to me, I thought they were kind of like a button mushroom. Almost.
Yeah, I think so too. Very meaty, right?
Yeah.
My first impression was tainted because I thought I had the sprinkle side of my black pepper open. I like to give a little sprinkle of salt, sprinkle of pepper, and a little butter and fry them up. And I dumped about 2 tablespoons of pepper and then was trying to rinse it off and rewash them. So they were very peppery the first round, but no, I went back out a few days later, picked a bunch more. And yeah, they're... obviously they're not as delicious as a morel, but I think they're as good as any store-bought button mushroom I've eaten, and very meaty, filling. I think they're good. I've not found an edible mushroom in the wild that I think is inferior to a store-bought mushroom in any way.
That's the one that I might think probably is a slippery jack.
I've not had them, so.
I didn't find anything great about that, but I've heard people talk about them and be like, oh, you need to dry these and then try and cook them and rehydrate them or whatever. And I haven't done that. I just cooked up one little chunk of it just to see what it would taste like, test it out, do the first little sample, because you're always kind of nervous. No, did I get it right? Am I right this time? And then I picked some chicken fats the other day, but I never ended up cooking them. Ended up getting busy and never getting around to it, but...
Something kind of interesting, Luke, is we have a friend, High Knob, which is just north of here. It's real famous for horseback riding in Shawnee National Forest. And our friend Anthony puts on a mule ride. And there's usually between 500 and 700 mules that gather at High Knob. And, we ride Shawnee. And that's always in the springtime. And guys come back with saddlebags full of morels, and they sell them. We've had a couple of kids in our club that come up with some problems, I'll just say, and so we do fundraisers for them, and they sold about 40 pounds of morels and made almost
$40 a pound. Roughly.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, being a benefit, they got almost $1,000 for these mushrooms because people overpaid just because it was, for the cause. But, it's amazing to see these guys come back with 10, 15 pounds of morels, saddlebags just full of them.
That's, yeah.
And
that's like we have like almost a distinct season here in Illinois and in the Midwest in general. But what's crazy is like you go out to places like Colorado, Idaho, and stuff like that. Lower elevations get them first, and you can just pretty much follow the weather up, and you can go all the way up to 12,000, 14,000 feet. Maybe not 14, but like all the way up to 12,000 feet, and still find morels pretty much your whole summer because of the whole elevation change and the weather. And it's kind of cool that most people think of morels out west. I was talking to a guy, in fact, the guy that sent us the mushrooms that we ate last night for dinner, those mountain porcinis, and he was telling me, he's like, yeah, most people think of burns and they only look in burns, but if you look in the right places and under the right conifers and different things like that out west, you can pretty much just follow the spring melt all the way up.
Yeah, like we were just talking about the other day with the weather patterns in the mountains and how you can go from the rain to the snow to the sunny weather above the mountain or above the clouds. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, in the same day.
Yeah.
No, that's pretty cool. It's something I never really, thought about either. And my whole thing was like, oh yeah, spring, you go out spring bear hunting, find a bunch of morels, just find a burn, find morels. But no, I guess they apparently grow other places. People just don't realize that. But I think that's kind of cool. So,
well, yeah, it's funny. Now that you mention it, the ones that we have found for several years on our local trail by my house came after a clearing. This is a trail that's been there for, I don't know, 100 years or so, and it's paved. Bikers, runners come up and down it, and
it's the old railroad beds.
Yeah, everything was getting overgrown over this trail, and they came in with some machines and tore out all of the young trees along the trail, cleared everything out, opened it up a little bit, and it was 2 years later, mushrooms started popping up all around, right in that strip where they had cleared a 6 or 7 foot section of small trees, and a bunch of elms, obviously, and we've got about a half-mile section where they popped up after that. So
what I never realized when I first got into mushroom hunting was that it's not just elm trees or tulip trees like the poplar trees around here. That's all I thought it was like poplars and elms. And then what was weird was all of a sudden I started seeing them pop up in my yard. And I removed a black oak tree and had the stump ground. And about 2 years later, they popped up. And I'm like, what the heck? So it's not only that, but then a lot of half-free morels and stuff, they end up growing around pine trees. And I had no idea. And my buddy's like, no, I'm finding them. I'm like, where are you finding them at your house? All you have is pine trees. And he's like, no, I'm finding them in the pine trees. And then I started doing some research, and the more you read about it, the more you find out it's not just, the mycelium isn't just having a mycorrhizal relationship with just that tree. There's other ones that they have relationships with. And you brought it up the other day, how certain strains of mycelium adapt to different things in their environment, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So what mushrooms are you excited about that you want to find in the future?
So the chanterelles, right? We found a ton, like you said. We found them out at the archery club, literally littered among the grass as we walked through the field course. And we were a little bit late, right?
Yep.
Week late. They were a little bit soft. We picked some. I ultimately, like you said, life happened. We got busy. I couldn't cook them that day. The next day. And that's kind of the gotcha of mushroom hunting, right? It's how long are they going to stay good after you get a chance to find them before you need to cook them. And unfortunately, I've watched some go to waste. The chanterelles that we found, they weren't great when we found them. And by the time I was ready to cook them, they weren't fit to be cooked. So
kind of like those shrimps in the fridge.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm eyeballing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I told Luke before we came down here, I had found those shrimps. We cooked them up last weekend, and they were absolutely delicious. And I told him, I said, hey, I'll go back out to the archery club on Thursday before we head down south. I'll see if I can find some, and I'll bring them down. We'll eat some if I find them. Well, I found a few handfuls and forgot them in my refrigerator. So
that's all.
But hey, you got the porcinis in the mail.
I did.
So our fresh tenderloin of the venison was cooked up with delicious wild mushrooms anyway, even though I forgot the shrimps.
That was a good thing I checked the mailbox.
I'm glad you did. You got all kinds of goodies.
All kinds of goodies in there before we left.
Fresh back straps and not even 6 hours old.
Yeah.
Those are hard to beat.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, there isn't much better than taking that tenderloin out, especially after hauling it out of the woods. And
The inner
being able to
loins
eat it that
especially.
night.
Yeah.
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 That's Amy's favorite part. My wife, that's her favorite part.
Oh, yeah.
There's something special about killing a deer and the same day breaking it down into quarters, getting those prime tenderloins out, cooking them up with, there again, if you've got some wild mushrooms to go with them, that's kind of that's the dream now, right? We go out, we get some venison, we come home with some mushrooms with them, just like in spring turkey hunting. You go out and you hope you get some morels if you get a chance to get a turkey.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is, and you pointed out the skills that have kind of fallen by the wayside, the foraging and the hunting, and these are the things that I think ultimately are going to become a lot more important in the future. And I do feel like we are privileged in the situation we're in to have people to have taught us all of these skills and to be in that world and to ultimately, with beef being $6, $7, $8 a pound, with inflation going through the roof, the idea that we can go out into the wild and get what we need to survive is kind of a driving factor behind all of my hobbies right now.
Yeah.
I
I got into cold smoking a couple years ago, which I'd never done. I've always smoked, jerky and all kinds of stuff, but built a really nice cold smoker, and I probably smoked 75 to 100 pounds of cheese for people.
That's awesome.
And people never had, a lot of people's never had smoked cheese. And
how long do you let it rest? A couple months or
the cheese?
Yeah.
It's after you smoke it, it's best to let it go at least 6 or 8 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like it absorbs some of that harshness of the smoke on the outside.
Yeah.
It absorbs it into it. But, I got into charcuterie a couple years ago. I'm making all kinds of capicola and pork loins. That's just, seasoned in salt. Use 3% salt and put it in a casing. You just hang it in your basement, 56, 60-degree weather. Let it set for 3 months. You want to lose 30% of its weight, natural weight. And, it's like a very hard salami when you cut it paper thin.
Oh, it's beautiful, though.
Yeah.
And that's something I've always, wanted to get into, but not only learn how to do it, but learn how to do it, the old ways.
Yeah.
The ways that they actually did it to preserve their game and all these other things to make it not only taste good, but last the whole year.
Sure.
Until they got more. And that's always something that's kind of intrigued me. So that's pretty cool. I might have to come over and watch some of that. I watched a guy, I can't remember, you and I were talking earlier about the whole YouTube thing and some of the families and people who watch on YouTube. There was one guy where they were homesteaders, and they were using, celery powder, and they hang a whole deer ham, and they were doing that and drying it and preserving it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's pretty cool. And it reminds me of, when I was a kid, I'd watch Old Yeller. And in Old Yeller, they'd go shoot the deer, salt it, and hang it on the porch, and the Old Yeller dog was sitting there salivating over it,
Well, I'm 69 years old, and my grandparents were poor farmers in Kentucky, and the smokehouse was built in the side of a hill, and we were forbidden as kids to go in Grandpa's smokehouse, and the reason was that was their winter's meat, and they didn't want us kids doing anything that would contaminate it or damage it, and, so it was a preservation thing. But I remember Grandpa going in there with my grandpa. And he'd cut 2 pounds of ham off of a big, 35-pound pork hock ham that he'd cured. And they're eating that ham 3 and 4 years later. And it stays inside that smoker, not refrigerated. Once he cut a slab off, he'd lather it down with some black pepper to keep the insects off of it. And they just kept eating off that ham. And, I've been watching some YouTube videos of some of these old boys out in Virginia. And he was talking about eating ham 7 years, a ham shoulder that was 7 years old. He's still eating it.
That's amazing. And it's things like that I feel we've gotten so far away from.
We have, yeah.
And now it's almost become people have had an innate just fear automatically instilled in them. And, don't eat that. You don't know what that is. Well, how do you know what it is?
Yeah.
I've got an instinct that's telling me that I can probably eat that, and I just need to do a little bit of research.
Yeah. Well, I started making homemade cheese 2 years ago. Unfortunately, it takes 6 to 8 months before, you can take your first bite of your cheese that you made. So you really don't know for 8 months if it's going to be edible or not. You know, I made a couple of cheeses that some people liked. Seth didn't like a couple of the cheeses I made.
It was a mixed bag. Some of them were good, some of them not so much, but you
Yeah.
don't know until you try it, right?
Yeah,
You don't
yeah,
know until you
exactly.
go in and
Yeah.
You know, some of
like
the
he said,
cheddars,
these lost arts, right?
cheddar
It's-
cheeses are a little easier to make, but you know, I mean, you know, it's finding fresh whole milk is the problem.
Well, that's like, I mean, I was reading something about, I don't even know what they call it these days, but at the time they used to call them Inuits. But they would hunt like caribou and stuff too. And if the caribou had milk,
Yeah.
they would take that milk, and however they would do it, they'd put it in like a bladder or something like that and make cheese out of the bladder. And I'm like, how does anybody even know how to do that other than like experience?
I'm sure
and
there was a lot of people.
experimentation?
I'm sure there was a lot of people died in the process. You know, 200-300 years
just
ago.
like learning which mushrooms are poisonous.
Yeah.
or even a couple thousand years ago, right? And I'm
Yeah.
thankful for those people that ate that mushroom to say, nope, don't eat that one.
Right.
Hey, that one over there, by the way, the Vikings ate that one, and that's how they got the name Berserker.
And how fortunate are we for the people who came before us and have written the books
Right.
that we look at and that we trust to tell us what's edible and what's not, right? It's yeah, the people that have died, the people who have spent their lives studying these things and making it clearer for others, because there's those safe few that are you can't mistake them, and then there's a whole bunch that you've got to know what you're doing, and we're lucky now with the internet and with so many great books that I can find 500 pictures if I need to of an edible mushroom and its poisonous counterpart, and make sure I'm positive that it's edible. So
That's like, I read somewhere.
standing on the shoulders of giants, right?
Right. I read somewhere that like there's 1,000 or 1,100 domestic cultivars that we eat, that we consume, and that's it. And out of those domestics, like the other ones that are out there that are edible are like in the 30,000s or something like that of other plants. And it's hard to even imagine that. Like we go through our life and just go to the grocery store and that's it. I wish there was more old timers that could pass that stuff on to you,
And that's like, being 69 years old, the old timers to me are the guys that are still 89, 90 that are still alive, and I've got some real valuable information from those guys, and I wish 20 years ago I'd picked their brains a lot more. Yeah. It's not till I got older that I started liking to do things the old-fashioned way, and it's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, but in the end, I feel anything that you have that's worthwhile is work.
Yeah.
Getting that deer, what makes the experience great is you busted your ass dragging it out, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then taking painstaking in the rain, you were breaking it down, and then we put it in the game bags and in the cooler. All of that makes it so much more worth it when you cook that first steak at home.
I love mushrooms. I love red meat. I'll buy them from the store, and I'll enjoy them from the store or from whatever restaurant's selling them. There is an entirely different level of appreciation for something when you find it, whether it be a mushroom, you find it, you identify it, you make sure it's edible, you clean it, you cook it, you eat it. You go out into the woods, you find that deer, you kill it. Because bottom line, you're eating meat. Someone is taking that life, and someone's processing that meat. And like you said before, you don't see that happen. You don't know what's happening. The idea that you take that life and you process that meat, there's a whole other level of appreciation for every bite you eat, and really makes you thankful for what we have, right? And that every time I bite into a chunk of venison, whether it be a taco or a delicious tenderloin like last night, there's that level of appreciation for what we have and the skills that we've been taught and the whole process. It's special to me. It's so much more than just food, right? At that point, it's the process.
That and I like the way I trim my roasts. You know what I mean? I am meticulous. I take care. Anytime I've ever taken any game to a processor, it comes back with hair on it. There's chunks of bone in it. There's still cartilage or whatever on it that I didn't want. And I've never had it from anywhere where they trimmed it the way I wanted it.
No, I think that's like blue skin. I am so meticulous about even for my ground venison, I like to get 90%, 95% of that blue skin.
If you don't, it takes on a different taste.
It does.
And
That's where a lot of that gaminess comes from, is because it's not trimmed right. It's not prepared properly.
And I will admit, and my wife doesn't like some of my ground on my second deer last year, and we were in a hurry and ground some with that on there. Not even that much. Like, I took the majority off, but it was enough to off-put the taste to where she didn't even want to eat it.
Yeah.
And I think, especially like a non-hunter going to eat that, that's not what you want to give them anyway.
Right. And it's interesting what all goes into the flavor. You recognize after 25 years of killing deer and eating them, you realize that, your bigger, more muscular bucks are going to be a little tougher. They're going to be a little gamier, as is the length of time it takes that deer to die from the time it's hit, right?
Yeah.
If adrenaline's pumping through its body, it might not taste as good as it would if you punched it straight through the heart and it ran 15 yards and fell over dead, right?
Well, getting them opened up and cooled off is such a huge thing that people need to, I used to, it's about 326 miles here from our house, and during deer season, you're driving home and here's all these hunters that's got their trophies on top of their vehicle, and it's 78 degrees out. Oh. They've been hanging in a tree for 3 days. Skin's still on them, and these guys just riding around showing off their animals. I'm sitting there going, that's going to be some quality venison.
Right. Get it to the butcher, get it in the cooler. Yesterday, perfect example, right?
Yeah.
We're tired. I whacked one in the morning. We spent the early afternoon getting it processed, getting it quartered, getting it on ice. We all went back out.
I whacked mine.
You whacked one, and we're tired. We're all sore. It's the end of a long day, and ultimately the bottom line is we got a deer hanging. It's not going to get cold tonight, and we got work to do, right? So
on ice.
Yeah, we got her on ice, and
45 minutes, and team effort. We tag teamed it and got it done.
Yeah, and there again, being able to process your own deer, because so many people, it took me years and years of hunting because we had it made. We had a processing facility 15 minutes from where we hunted for years and years, and they'd cut up a deer, and they did a pretty good job. They really did a nice job, and it was cheap. So, we did take a lot of deer to them. But ultimately, it's knowing that your deer was broken down, processed, gotten on ice quickly.
Yeah, we'll throw a plug out. It's Woody's over in
Dongola, Illinois.
Yep, Woody's Meat Locker.
Yeah, they process a lot of deer. They do a good job.
They got some.
There's nobody around here. We got to drive an hour from where we're at right now to get a deer processed, and it's not going to happen quickly.
Yep. They got some of the best deer bacon you've ever had. If anybody's never had deer bacon, it's a processed bacon, ground up with pork fat and smoked, and just incredible.
You know what I don't like about all that though? You never know if it's just your deer. And you don't know how somebody else treated their deer.
That's true.
Right? And just how we were talking. And it almost makes me want to learn how to do those things, even though that one might be kind of hard to make the deer bacon, because I think you need a steam press or something like that.
No, I made deer bacon for the first time last year.
Okay.
It's pretty much got the same flavor. I probably didn't add quite enough pork butt with it. When you fried it, got a little bit dry. But what I ended up doing was I put 50-pound barbell weights on top of and made a press to hard press it overnight in the refrigerator. And then you take it out, smoke it, and then put it back in the refrigerator and get it really cool, just below freezing. And you can slice it paper thin on I got a Hobart meat slicer, industrial. So the secret is you have to have a lot of force, to pack that meat together. And
because I've liked it. I've always liked it when I had it made. But it became a certain point for me to where it was like, I had a deer, couldn't get it in one time.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, I have no choice now, right? I need to learn how to break it down.
Yeah.
Broke it down completely, and then started doing it myself, and then realized this is way better this way, right? I have ultimate control over every aspect of it.
That's the exact situation I've run into, right? We were spoiled for so many years. We had a great hunting spot. We had a great spot right down the road. We could drop these deer off. They get processed.
Pick 'em up
He'd
second
pick them up
season.
second shotgun season, no problem. And yeah, ultimately they were cheap and they did a good job. And since then, we've had deer processed a couple times, and ultimately the price ends up it's high. And I've questioned how much hair and bone chunk and cartilage I found in
Who
the
else's
meat.
deer is?
Whose deer am I really eating? And
Yeah.
yeah, like it was such an intimidating thing to start cutting up my own deer, right? Because I had someone do it. But yeah, I'm with you. When you do it all yourself, there's a whole other level of there's an appreciation and just comfort in what you're eating.
Yeah.
You know for a fact that this didn't touch anyone else's hands. I took the life, I field dressed, I skinned and quartered and deboned and ground, and now we're sitting down at the table to eat it. And
Yep.
those are skills that, I'm excited. I've got a 9-year-old. I'm excited that next year he'll probably come down and start hunting, and these are skills that I can teach him. They're skills that I feel fortunate that my dad took me hunting as a kid, and that I know how to go out and hunt, because there again we talk about politics and current times and inflation, and I'm not intimidated ultimately.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, times could get hard, but we'll eat. we'll all eat just fine, right?
Yep. That's for sure.
No, I think it's pretty cool, and as like you and I are learning together now on this whole mushroom journey, which is pretty cool. It's just that many more skills that we're developing and that we can learn. Your dad's learning those things, and I'm sure your son's going to be over there and learning from him. How to cure these hams and different things like that. And I think that's pretty cool, and it's another way to just not only just pass on knowledge, but spend time with the future generation to ensure that they have the capabilities and the knowledge to survive, right?
Yeah.
Everything's not on the button of a Nintendo game or some TV set, PlayStation, whatever. Those are skills that they're learning that's fun.
Yeah.
But it's not going to put food on their table in hard times.
Yeah.
So we have to teach them at least how to survive. And you can survive pretty well with some pretty good food on the table if you know how to do it,
Yeah.
Picking the edible plants and
there's a balance there, right? Finding our way through modern life, and our kids go to schools and we have jobs in corporate America, and it's finding this balance between living in that world while also honing and keeping sharp the skills that we already have and learning new skills that could help us, because none of those things keep you alive.
No.
The internet is not keeping us alive. The bottom line,
and when the grocery stores are all empty shelves, there's going to be a lot of people that have not a clue where their next meal is going to come from.
Consider myself very fortunate that I have a lot of people in my life like you guys, that I'm not the only one out there with this mentality, right? I mean, because it's the community, the hunting community, the foraging community. We're a small percentage of the overall population, but really I think it's so important that my kids learn this. I'm not going to run around screaming at the rooftops that society needs to learn it, but I can't imagine with current times and having young kids, I can't imagine not teaching them to fend for themselves.
Remember what Ted Nugent told you when you were about...
Ted told me a lot of things.
Yeah.
Can you specify?
Well, we're at the sports show, and Seth got to know Ted Nugent really well. And at the end of the show, Ted put his hand on my shoulder and he says, "Ron, keep Seth hunting, and you'll never have to hunt for your child."
Yep.
And as wild as Ted can be and seem, he is really a down-to-earth guy and a little radical, which, some of us are. And but he's got some real good values. And he told Seth, stay out of the malls, stay out of the malls. Stay in the woods.
You did become a mall rat for a little bit there, but I think all of us do.
Yeah.
But,
spending time in the woods is much more beneficial than
absolutely
being in a shopping mall.
Absolutely,
yeah.
That's like, I remember when my parents first got their property. You came out because I wanted to start deer hunting, and I was like, let's go deer hunting out there, Seth.
Yeah.
So you went out and put up stands for us, and, kind of scouted the property and stuff. And I'll never forget to this day, That's one of the biggest bucks I've ever seen. You put me on him by one of the big old oak tree.
Yeah.
And it was my first morning out. Had my bow. I'd been shooting it for like 2 years before that, right? And just super confident with it. This before rangefinders. Get that buck, start shaking all over the place. I can't even concentrate. I forgot I had a bow in my hand at that point. He was so big. Just big old sway back, sway belly on him. Giant, I don't know, 14 point, whatever it was. I think you'd seen him at night out there.
Yeah.
And
we saw him on the road.
Huge.
Yeah, saw him.
And I see him, and he's standing there in front of me, and he was probably 30 yards, and I aimed 20 on him and put my pin on him and drew back and boop, right underneath him. And he stood there. He didn't even move because it never had any pressure in that area.
No, never been shot at before.
Well, I'm sure he'd probably been shot at, but not a whole lot of pressure from that area. And so I put another arrow in, and I aimed like 35 or I, put it on him. Boom, right over his back, and he took off running.
Third time wasn't a charm.
I never saw that deer again, but to this day, I think to myself, wow, like that's the biggest deer I'd probably still to this date ever drew back on, and completely missed him. But you put me in the right spot. So
it's I come from a family of hunters. Unfortunately, none of them were ever deer hunters. My grandpa and dad. Born and raised Kentucky, rabbits, squirrels, food on the table was a necessity, but none of my family ever deer hunted, so that's something I was kind of self-taught. And, you go through a lot of trials and tribulations in the learning process. Yeah. I was fortunate enough I shot my first deer in 1970, and deer were, when we lived in Elwood on the farm when I was a kid, so we're talking about like 1961, 62, all the local farmers, it was a big thing at the Quonset hut for coffee in the morning that somebody saw a deer in their field. I mean, deer were not very popular in Illinois in 1959, 1960.
Turkeys were non-existent. Yeah.
Yeah, non-existent.
The red-tailed hawks were non-existent when I was a kid, and the way they've made
it come back. We had to drive halfway to Terre Haute, Indiana to see a turkey vulture.
Wow.
And now look at the seagulls you see in the city, in the parking lots. Yeah. So evolution has changed, And
speaking of turkey vultures, we thought we might have had some turkeys this morning. I was about to pop an arrow, and then we realized there was a couple of vultures on my gut pile from the night before.
That just goes to show you, though, right? Like the model of conservation and how it actually works and how well it works if it's applied properly.
Well, look at all the cooling lakes, from the nuke stations, how it's changed the migration route of the geese.
Yep. Except now I think the windmills might have changed that again.
Well, that's possible.
Yeah. But
that's a whole other subject there.
It's a great thing. Like you were telling me last night, I kind of tell me about this story because you barely went into it last night about you had a Kodiak Magnum bow, was your first bow, right?
Oh yeah.
And you went out and shot it. Can you tell me that story? Do you remember it?
Yeah, I was new to archery, and I bought a Kodiak Magnum, and they were short. They were a very short bow, and
52 inches overall, or 54 overall?
Yeah, something like that. Well, when you pull the string back, because we were shooting with just 3-finger tab, a leather tab, and it would pinch your fingers so bad that you almost couldn't take it, and I had some interesting experiences. I actually shot my first 10-point buck out of a car in a junkyard. I was hunting on the edge of it, and it was such a frosty, cold morning. About 8 o'clock, I couldn't take it anymore. So I climbed down, and there was an old 54 Chevy and had the windows in it. So I climbed in there. You know how the sun comes through the front window? And I'm sitting there, and I look up, and here comes this buck. Now, he'd been wounded, and he had a pretty bad limp. Not sure that had anything to do with me getting him, but I easily rolled the window down, and I held the Kodiak Magnum horizontally and pulled back, and I shot him at 5 yards.
That's awesome.
And I nicknamed him my junkyard buck. And but yeah, somebody had shot him with a 22.
Oh, jeez.
He had a 22 pellet in his front shoulder, but. Yeah, that Kodiak Magnum, and then we'd sit there and shoot arrows straight up in the air, and
run away.
But you
from
could,
them.
you could always see them. And I'll never forget, I bought a compound, a golden eagle compound. And I'll never forget, my buddy Bob and I was out in a bean field, and we were shooting arrows up, and I put a wooden arrow on that compound and shot it, and we lost sight of it instantly.
Oh no!
And so we're running around this field, not we got our hands over our head like that's going to help you. and thank goodness the arrow landed 150 yards from us, and we thought, maybe since you can't see him, this is not a fun game to play anymore.
Did you finger shoot that bow too? Then
Yeah.
The eagle.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I never finger shot a compound bow, even though it kind of reminds me of like the Wenzel brothers. Remember them out in where they grew up in Pennsylvania?
It didn't seem like they come out with mechanical releases, because that Golden Eagle was one of the very first compounds that ever come out, and I don't remember anybody shooting mechanical releases for a couple of years.
What was I remember when we were kids, you had a bow hanging in your garage that you didn't use anymore, but it had like compound, like almost like compound looking limbs or recurve looking limbs on like a compound.
Oh, that was that Golden Eagle target bow I had.
Okay.
The one that had the big stabilizer in the front of it.
Oh man, I haven't thought about that bow in forever.
Yeah.
Oh, that was pretty cool.
Well, I shot a 6-inch overdraw with that, and we were shooting the lightest toothpick arrows we could get. Because we're shooting.
Everybody's chasing speed.
Yeah,
Well, that
yep.
was the thing.
We're
The overdraw was the way of the time.
chasing speed, and some of the 3D tournaments, you have an elk out there at 80, 85 yards, and then they had the bionic there that you either shot through the center of it or it'd explode your arrow and just ruin, and I shot hundreds of archery tournaments over the years.
Kind of like that cow with the archery range.
Oh jeez. Oh, I told you about that, right?
No, I don't think you told me about that.
So we're standing there BSing, and we're BSing so much we're not paying attention to the targets. And I arranged the target, or so I thought, because I wasn't paying attention, and I'm like, that's odd. Why is this cow here?
Luke brought his rangefinder. I didn't.
Okay.
He's telling me the range. We're guessing, and then he's telling me.
Well,
He goes 26 yards. I go, it's got to be 37 to 42 yards. And I'm looking at the foam buck back in the woods.
Okay.
He goes 26 yards. I'm like, man, I'm way off. Can't believe it. Well, I'm yapping. We're talking mushrooms. Luke draws. And as I look at him, I realize he's not aiming at the target that I'm looking at out in the woods. And
They
he
have a
lets
cow statue.
and he lets his arrow go. And I knew instantly what had happened because I almost did it a week before walking the field course. They got a concrete cow sitting out in the middle of the field course.
No.
And he ranged the cow. And I'm looking at the deer, and we're still talking. I'm thinking in my head, man, that can't be that close. There's no way that's 26 yards. And right as I'm getting ready to tell him, you're not aiming at the target, he lets it go, and I realize, boom! Boom! His arrow just explodes. A dust of concrete goes through the air.
The aluminum insert exploded. The arrow itself didn't explode. It actually held together pretty well. It just smushed that
Yeah,
in
it smashed
a little bit.
it in.
But the aluminum insert in there just exploded. And I'm going, I was wondering why there was a cow here on the course. Like, why is there a cow?
I got a picture of it.
But there is marks. Apparently, a lot of other people shoot that too.
At least.
sure.
So here's the thing. I wish I would have realized because I would have told him.
I
was out there.
I mean, I'm only
maybe
out like $40 on
I was
it.
out there maybe 2 weeks. 2 weeks before I'm out there, and I looked across in that area, and I thought, why would they have a cow out there? Is that a foam target? And I looked at it. Well, this wasn't when a 3D tournament was happening. The 3D targets are normally not out in the field course. We have field targets. And I looked at it. I'm like, people have to shoot that all the time. And sure enough, as I walked by, I saw all of the little puncture marks where it had been pelted with arrows. And then, and I laughed about it. I'm like, oh, these poor guys shooting this concrete cow on accident.
Yeah, you're looking at $20 an arrow nowadays, and
or more.
Well, talk about arrows. Luke had a kind of unique experience last night, coming down the hill. You want to tell us?
Yeah.
You want to tell us about that?
I'm walking down the hill.
Total
I knew,
dark.
I knew you took a deer. And I'm like, what is that? I thought maybe it was a headlamp at first or something, or like a pen light. And I'm like, no, it's not moving. And I go, hey, whistled at it. Nothing, didn't move. I'm like, okay, it must be a camera or something. And I walk back, and like another 40 yards, there you are standing there with your deer dragging it out of the woods. And I go, do you got a camera over there or something? There's like a green glow when I walked by, and he goes, oh, it's my arrow. Where'd you find it? I couldn't find my arrow. And I said, it's in the tree.
Well, the deer was on a ridge, the highest part of a ridge, and I shot him at 35 yards, and I knew it was a pass through, and because the arrow went another 80 yards,
At least.
and how high was it? It was
About 6 foot in the air.
about 6 foot up in the air, and it's pitch dark, and Luke's coming down the hill, and I thought, and I'd look for the arrow, but I didn't see it. The lighted knock, and so I was shocked when Luke found it, and we walked back and got my arrow. But yeah, I mean, you're looking at $20 an arrow by the time you get a.
Absolutely.
And it's funny because I was walking up the hill and I saw the one headlamp and I saw this green dot bouncing around. I was thinking, what is that up in the pasture?
They're kind of freaky. They're kind of freaky looking out in the.
Yeah, well, when it's just randomly sitting there, It's
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. I think that's a pretty good point to wrap this up with my stupidity. But thanks for having me down here and sitting down and talking to me.
You're welcome, and
it's been good talking.
thanks
to
for
you
your
guys.
friendship for the last 35 years.
Thanks for getting me started in bow hunting. Like you said, my family were hunters, but they were, upland game hunters and stuff. And it just never.
Yeah, my grandpa was a duck hunter, and my dad was pheasant, and rabbit, and squirrel, and.
And my dad used to take me fishing, but it wasn't as fun as hunting to me, and still isn't.
Yeah, yeah.
Now that I'm like exploring different avenues of fishing, it's pretty fun. But
we fished hundreds of hours when we were kids, but that's something about a half an hour, no bites on a fishing hole, and I'm getting pretty bored and getting kind of antsy. But I can sit in that tree stand for 5 hours,
5 hours,
and
12
not
hours.
not move a muscle, hoping. I do like fishing, but bow hunting, hunting in Africa was the highlight of my life. Getting to go on a couple safaris, especially getting to take Seth. After he graduated college, spend 7 days in Africa with your boy. That's quite an experience too. So
Absolutely.
Yep. So, but yeah, you're welcome to come down, and we'll definitely come down and do some turkey hunting in the spring, and you'll just become a permanent fixture here, Luke.
Yeah. Thanks for having us on the podcast, and thanks for coming down, doing some bow hunting with us.
Yeah, it's awesome.
We need to bag you one in the morning, and then it'll be a complete weekend, eh?
Yeah.
We got one more set. Let's go whack a few more.
Yep. Absolutely, man. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
And once again, thank you so much for listening to the Publicly Challenged podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show, and if you did, please subscribe on whatever platform it is you're listening to. Also, if you could leave a review, that would help us out. And you can check us out on Instagram or at publiclychallenged.com. And once again, thank you so much for listening to the show.